ready to build resiliency, create a healthy lifestyle, and overcome adversity with a warrior mindset. This is Define the Fight with Mariah Prusha.
She was named one of the top 25 women in business for the Midwest, the YWCA Woman of the Year in Business, CCRI Champion of Change. Prior to the board for CCRI, she was also a board member for the Great North, and she is currently, thankfully, I'm so blessed to have her on the board of Define the Fight. She is a mother of two, a dog lover, a competitive skeet shooter. The list goes on, but right now she is a cancer fighter. And after being diagnosed with cancer, she started her interlude to healing. Please welcome Miss Bethany Berkeley. How are you, my dear?
Good morning. I am doing good. Happy to be here, and good morning to all the listeners as well.
You know, you are such an inspiration to me, Bethany. We have connected in different realms of life, but not to the extent that we have as of recent going into the summer of 2023. You hold such a light, humility, and just energy that people naturally gravitate to. So I can see like all of the different lists of your accolades. How couldn't somebody want you on their board, but let alone want you in their corner? Let's dive into some of the different things that you've accomplished in your life, Bethany.
Sure. Well, and thank you. Likewise, I've admired you and been inspired by you for many, many years. And somehow the stars aligned and we've been able to create a friendship. And I consider you a mentor and someone that I continuously learn from. And I believe people should be in your life for you to learn from them. It should be a reciprocal relationship. So I get just as much, if not much, much more than you do. In terms of, my own climb, my fight, the accomplishments, when you were describing, you get a little gravel, right, on your shoes, on your butt, whatever it is, you fall down and you have a choice of how you're going to define that fight moving forward. And I have often visualized at some of my hardest points in life, just the heaviest points, right, when you feel hopeless, helpless, tired, when you feel like everything is out of control. I visualized myself in a dirt pit and it's pouring rain and the pit is starting to fill up with mud. And I have a choice. I'm going to sit there and let the pit fill up, right, with all of that negative self-talk, with all of that drain that seems to occur when things are hard. Or I'm going to claw my way out of it, right? Even though I might slip down, eventually I'm going to get out. And I have managed to get out every single time, right? With the help of God, with people in my corner. Those people in your corner are so important. And there have been times where it's come pretty close, where I was really close to throwing in the towel and saying, you know what? I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do it. And yet then you have this choice to make. I've already come this far. Or even if you just started, why did I do this to begin with? And reminding yourself of that vision is so important.
It is. And we've all fallen, but we all have a choice on if we want to get back up. So you went through, like, just looking at your bio, Bethany, dropping out of high school, that was one of your first pivotal moments of making a choice of, hey, either A, I'm going to go through life without taking that next step, but you chose, okay, maybe it's not a high school diploma, but it's the GED. And then you moved into being the second in class as you graduated from UT. What was that piece, or why did you choose at that moment in time to drop out of school?
Yeah, so I started the ninth grade and I was around 15 years old. My father passed away about 20 years ago. He was killed in a car accident. There's a lot of addiction and alcoholism in my family, and he was at a point in his life where I think was struggling with a lot of his own inner demons and battles. And neither here nor there. It's a part of my story, and it led to me dropping out. My family was going through a lot at that time. I was going through a lot at that time, and prioritizing a traditional education just really wasn't in the cards for me. It wouldn't make sense. There was more that I needed to do for my family, for all of them, right? And for myself at that time, and to really focus on what was ahead. So I dropped out. I ended up getting my GED when I was 16, and then I started taking classes at Austin Community College. And after about 2 years of that, I decided to transfer to a university. I really wanted to change the course of my life. I didn't want life circumstance that had happened prior to define who I was moving forward. My family didn't grow up with a lot. We lived a pretty easy lifestyle in terms of you had what you had. There wasn't a lot of room for asking for additional things. There was never an expectation that things were going to be handed to us. Right? You get what you give in life, and if you wanted something, you better know how to work for it. And so I was doing just that. I ended up getting into the University of Texas at Austin, despite many people who told me that it would be a waste of an application fee, that there was no chance that I would get in. And I remember that pivotal moment of getting the letter in the mail, back when they used to send letters and it wasn't just an email, right? And I'm shaking as I'm opening it, and I scan really quickly for those words, and I see that I had been accepted. And I immediately started crying, maybe for the first time, tears of joy and relief. And then I started that journey.
So when you heard the negative talk, and this happens to a lot of individuals in life, there's always going to be naysayers. Some people will listen and some people will bat them away like flies because they have that perseverance, they have that mental strength and that capability. What was it, or what is it, I should say, that's in you? What is that self-talk when you hear the naysayers or those trickling thoughts of, can I actually do this? Should I do this? What is that piece for you that helps you overcome that fight?
One of the people who doubted me during that period of my life, and there were many, right? And I do believe their intentions were positive. Again, I was working maybe 3 jobs. I didn't have a lot. And so an application fee to a university, and this is just an example, that was really hard for me to do. I could barely afford my own groceries, right? So, this guidance counselor gave me this advice, and she basically told me this isn't going to work, right? You should save this money instead. And then she slid across the table some trade school brochures. And I have a lot of respect for the trades. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that wasn't my dream, right? And so I remember thinking to myself, what's the worst that can happen here? Right? I'm out maybe $60, which again is a lot of money. It still is today, and it certainly was to me at that time. And I was almost in this mode. And again, I was a teenager, right? So I'm thinking, I'm going to prove her wrong. And as soon as I received that letter, after my tears of joy, I mailed her a copy of it because I wanted to make a point, and that point is, if I had listened to her, if anyone sometimes listens to people who try to put that voice in your head, if they're hopefully their intentions are positive, sometimes they're not, right? My entire life would have shifted. I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have the ability and flexibility to continue to fight cancer today and to be with my children. I have no idea where I would be. The point is, we have to take a step back and say to ourselves, am I going to give time and energy to what this person is saying to me? Are they credible, and do I trust them? Is it final, or can I actually take that, right, absorb it, and then say, what's the worst that can happen? Why not? Why not try something anyway?
Absolutely. That's a key thing is we're going to get no's. We're going to have doors that are shut in our face, but the reality is, what's worse, not trying or trying and potentially learning. That's really what it comes down to. She is such a leader, and there's a quote that I had posted the other day, and this is what truly defines an individual who leads by example, is a boss has the title, but a leader has the people, and Bethany definitely has the people. From Dale Carnegie, working there, turning into owning Dale Carnegie. Tell me about the lessons and the skills that you learned there, and then clearly how you impacted the lives of others.
There were many, but I want to just, break down some of the core areas that I feel really shifted my trajectory, the outcomes, a lot of self-exploration and discovery, and things that I still carry very close to my chest and my heart every day. One, before you start any venture, we have to set our intentions. We have to create a vision that's not just the external success components. We can say we want to make X amount of money, right? But how do we want to feel? Do we want to feel financially secure? What does that look like for us? So once you have these intentions, pen to paper, put it somewhere visible, remind yourself of that every single day, so that when you have that bad day, you can look at it and you can remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. The next part is, no guts, no glory. I have that in a poster from a local artist hanging in my house. And knowing that glory looks different for everyone, right? Regardless of what your vision is, your version of success is going to be different from what mine is, right? And so we have to think about the guts that is required of us in order to accomplish what we're looking for. Mariah, you said earlier, right? We get to choose how we're going to fight, and we can't expect that life is just going to happen, that our vision is just going to come to fruition. We have to actually have the guts, have the courage to do what needs to be done. And that leads me to the next part, right? We have to look at those intentions, look at the vision, think about what we're aiming towards, and ask ourselves what needs to give during this time period. Who do I have in my corner? Who is going to support me? How am I going to hold myself accountable? What am I going to do to stay true to myself, to really continue to hold on to my core values? And then having that opportunity to really check yourself, right? Taking an inventory about what your motives are, thinking and reflecting every single day, praying, right? Thinking about what you can do to be better and be proud of yourself. And building a reputation of credibility is a lot easier when you're authentic and when you're continuously learning. And if you don't do that, people are not going to trust you. Or if something happens in life where people are questioning your reputation or your credibility, you're not going to have it if you haven't been able to be consistent.
It comes down to you spoke about
more,
hey, it's all good. You spoke about vision. And the reality is sometimes the vision changes. And in your case, it has changed. But those nuggets that you just provided really instilled a lot of strength within you and mentally, physically, and spiritually helped prepare you for those different moments. Now, I went through some different training in the past, and there was one individual who stated, don't stand on the X, or don't stand on the X for too long, meaning when a life ambush hits, yes, stand there, address it. Take in all those feels that you need to during those moments, but don't be so caught up in what you can't do, but really truly focus on what can I do in this moment, really to just shift. And let's be honest, it sucks sometimes, right? Going into those emotional trenches, it's like we need to be walking around life with a shovel because you have to be ready to dig. Until you do that dirt dive, how do you expect to really take that next level or step in your life? With that being said, you've had to carry that shovel, and that shovel has really been digging deep lately. Now, your diagnosis, let's dive into how did that hit you literally like a storm, Bethany?
I was in the process of expanding the territory of ownership through Dale Carnegie. We had a phenomenal team of people, and I really mean it when I say I hired people smarter, more creative than I was. And the one thing that we all shared were the value system, right? We all had that in common, and that's the most important part. And just as things were reaching a peak, and then there was another peak, right? Because I'm not really a middle of the road type of person. It's like I'm not just going to hit a goal, I'm going to exceed the goal. And then once I've done that, what's next? Because that's just who I am. I thrive in that environment. So right around that time, I ended up in the hospital, and I had a minor concussion and a neck injury, and there was what we call an incidental finding. And I was sitting with a close friend of mine. And again, who you have in your corner is so important for this is one reason. You never know when life is going to take a turn. And the nurse came in and she was reviewing the scans, and then she brought up an image, and the image was a partial of my lungs. And there were a lot of spots on my lungs and, masses of various sizes. And as I saw this image, I started to hold my friend's hand, and I honestly was in shock. And I asked a couple of questions, what is this, or what do I do next? And could it be cancer? And the nurse just said, yes, it could be. We're going to have a lot of follow-up appointments. We're going to start getting everything set up in the system. And I remember leaving, and my first emotion was shock. I didn't know how to absorb it. I didn't know what was going to be next. I tried not to get stuck in that interim phase of hearing something like this before all of the testing, before a more comprehensive understanding, because we can get trapped there, right? In that mental game, it can be paralyzing. but I'm a mother. I was, a business owner. I had an entire team and clients that relied on me. I could not be paralyzed at that time. All I could do is continue to get up and show up. And that also helped me be selfless, right? When we talk about tips and things we've learned, one of the things that I've learned is to be truly selfless, and that, there's times in life where we can say it's okay to be selfish, right? If we need rest, if we need to prioritize our own needs. One of the ways that we're often selfish that we don't realize is by getting stuck up here, right? Self-doubt, fear, whatever it may be. We can replay a conversation, perhaps, right, for over and over and over again in our head, or a particular situation. Or we can be trapped in that fear zone of constantly thinking about what could be, what could happen. And when we're doing that, we're selfish because we're not fully engaged with other people. We're not where our feet are. And I love that saying, be where your feet are. And a friend and a mentor used to say that a lot. And it really resonates with me because we can't change something right away. We can't solve everything in the moment. What we can do is keep our life going. And what I believe for a lot of people who are on the climb and who fall and maybe stay there is that they've lost sight of what it means to be selfless, really taking care of other people, really being present. They get paralyzed, right? And absorbed by fear, absorbed by all of that negativity. And they end up sort of just throwing in the towel, right? And if you keep going, your life keeps going. You're still working towards your vision, even if at the moment it's really heavy, even if at the moment there's a downpour. Now, one thing that you can do is, try to really take a step back, right? Breathe, still take care of yourself. And that's what I mean by, we can be selfish at some points in life, but really that's just self-care. I don't think it's selfish.
I was going to say it's
Being selfless by
self-awareness.
showing up is,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
self-awareness. And when you were sitting in that spot, Bethany, I'm going to throw out a couple nuggets here is OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, take action. And sometimes when you're in that shock phase, most people will react. It's a reactive response instead of sitting back and observing, okay, hold on here. What is the information that is being given to me? How can I sit back on this and just really process it? And then you have time. Now I'm going to decide what is next. And then it requires taking action, which you did. You said you had to sit there, you're holding your friend's hand, taking a deep breath. And most people, it's really diving in and it's like, hold on a second. Let's just sit here. I just need to breathe. And then it comes into play. And with life, you're talking about mountains. The reality is, when you are a driven person, you're always going to climb the mountain. And once you get to that top of the mountain, it's a false summit. There's another mountain to climb, and that's mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And we go on different mountains in different places and spaces in our life. Sometimes we sit high on the physical one, and then we shift into the emotional. We go back and forth, but recognizing that the climb is still the climb. Sometimes it's just in different chunks, and it's in different phases. So, Bethany, we're going to go a little bit more into what were the follow-ups? What was the action? What were the decisions that you had after being diagnosed? And seeing the scan, I have a lot of different friends right now that are fighting cancer. I had a Reiki session with an individual who I had never met before, who came in to have energy work done, was gray. And by the time that we were done, he was red. He had color and, again, a different perspective on, am I throwing in the towel? Am I in the place of accepting but not fighting? And each person is different. We spoke about the emotional trenches, Bethany. Here they come. So I hope that you have your shovel. We're going to dive into your response. You spoke about seeing the scans. Now let's talk about what happened after you actually got the news and what steps you took after.
Yeah, the news wasn't fully understood for quite some time. And that's the interesting thing is there's so much urgency around something like cancer. And yet most often the system is overwhelmed and it takes time to know those answers. And so step one was to continue to get up and show up, right? Continue to do what I needed to do so that I wasn't paralyzed and truly being present and getting out of my head, right? Because I couldn't control where I was at that time. You know, in the process, as I learned more, which it turns out that I have something called Lynch syndrome, which means that cancer spreads more rapidly than other forms of cancer. So after many, many appointments and navigating the system, come to find out the nodules, the masses in my lungs were actually tumors that came from my colon. So it had metastasized and was already at stage 4. Now, obviously, what you typically hear in those situations, and what I heard was I needed to start chemo aggressively and radiation aggressively right away. And like most people, actually, before I go into that, I want to make a disclaimer that everybody has a unique journey. Everybody has a path, right? Especially when they're fighting a terminal illness. And this is my path. When I talk about this, I'm not advocating for or necessarily trying to indicate that one is right or wrong. I'm just going to share my experience. So after going through all of these appointments, finding out what the recommendation was, that was very unsettling for me. I knew that there would be a massive amount of disruption in my life. Either way, right? My life had shifted instantly, right? The cancer had been thriving in my body, and I just didn't know, right? We all get tired, we all get headaches. I just didn't know. And I probably ignored some of it because it was always go, go, go. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I started the chemo and radiation journey, and I got incredibly sick. Not just my physical self, the level of exhaustion, I can't even begin to describe the disruption internally and externally in my life. There's your body's trying to fight something. It's trying to acclimate to, right, chemo, all of these chemicals that are going through your body and through your veins every single day. I was trying to show up for speaking engagements or to train clients while I'd have to run out and go throw up. Right. Sometimes there was a lot of blood in my throat, right? It's all these things, and you wipe it off and you try to, right, do a little mouthwash or whatever and go back into the room. I try to not fall over while I was speaking so that I could keep going. Right. And it was incredibly taxing. And I remember a moment, I started to lose my hair, and this is recently purchased hair because, right, my hair was strong enough for me to do that. But I started to lose my hair, and I was, again, so tired and so sick. It's almost like the life had been drained out of me. And for one of the first times in my life, I didn't know if I could keep going or not. There were times when I thought, if this is what it's going to be like, I don't know if I want to live. Right? And that's not me. That's not the person that I am. I don't do that. And this was the first time where I really did. And I'm looking in the mirror, and I had started to lose my hair, and it was just this shallow face, right? I started to lose a lot of color in my face. I had a lot of, just inflammation issues, circulation problems. And I didn't know who I was anymore, almost as if this beast inside of me was taking everything, right? And I crumbled, and I remember falling to my knees and just crying and asking God, what do I do? Right? I have children. I have this team. I have all of these things. What do I do? I can't do this. I can't do this. And again, I'm not that person. I've never said that to myself ever in my life until that moment. And then I started to explore other options. I knew that I needed a break from chemo and radiation. There was something in that moment, and most often, a lot of us, we may not pray all of the time, but we certainly would pray when things get really hard, right? And I had this new strength to look into other options because I knew I could not continue doing what I was doing. I knew that I couldn't feel like I'd rather die when I have so much to live for because of the physical and emotional toll that I was going through. It's so unsettling and so hard. The reckoning of who you were before the diagnosis versus what your life is like while you're fighting it, right? And that shifts based on how you choose to fight it. And I chose to explore other paths. And I took a break from all of that, and I needed to get the rest of things in order. I knew that I was given a terminal diagnosis. That was very clear. I knew that it was going to continue to spread rapidly unless I made changes. So I put pen to paper, and I wrote out all of the things that I gave time and energy to. And I did this because the research I started to do more and more was showing me that stress, right, cortisol levels, when they peak, cancer thrives on cortisol, just like cancer thrives on carbohydrates, right, and sugar and things like that. So the more stressed we are, our body goes into distress, and cancer can actually win quicker. So I had to prioritize what I was going to do moving forward. Who am I going to give time? What am I going to give time and energy to? So I made this list of the top 10 things, and I told myself, this is not feasible anymore. It's just not. I had to cross off about 5 to 7 things right away. And it's that moment in your life, or for me, it was, okay, now how can I scale that and make that manageable? Because the business still has to operate. The team still needs to be taken care of. My children still need a mom, right? I still have things I have to do in life. So I'm going to have to make hard choices. One of the first hard choices was, I mean, making that list in general, right? And taking a step back and saying to myself, I only have so much bandwidth. I don't get to be that version of myself right now. I have to make compromises. I have to do something different. I can't do everything I was doing before. So that meant, even looking at my friendships, my relationships, there were people in my life at that time that um, I realized I didn't have time or energy for. People outgrow friendships. Sometimes friendships can be toxic. And while I owned the business, learned that kind of the hard way. And that toxicity was not good for me anymore. It wasn't healthy. It was creating more stress. And so I shifted some of the support dynamics in my life, and that was a huge help. It was a huge weight that was released from me during that time. I knew that I needed to take care of business and position the business and the team to know that things were going to need to change. I knew that in order to beat this and to fight it fully and to dedicate, right, the life I have left to do that, I would need to sell the business. I would need to allow myself that time to do what needs to be done, which broke my heart. I had
Well, you
found
built
this
it.
perfect.
You built it, Bethany. You built it up, and you put your heart and soul in a lot of individuals. When it comes down to taking that plunge, you didn't fear the plunge, you took it, and you put all your eggs in one basket. And when you are looking at living and leading from a heart-centered place and leading individuals and helping them grow, that's where you're leaving impact. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I am taken back here. Now I am potentially having to give this up. You brought up a point about making a list and looking at those top 10 things of where do you want to put your energy towards, your time and your energy. And driven individuals will add multiple things onto their plate. I kind of follow your lead on that, Bethany, too, where there's multiple things that we're passionate towards that bring us that hope, that excitement, that drive, that perseverance, all of those different pieces of the puzzle. But we don't have to wait until we get a diagnosis to do a reevaluation on our life and what is the most important, including when you mentioned friendships, is we outgrow individuals. And if they're not ready to grow, you can't tug the rope. Sometimes you have to say, hey, I appreciate our friendship. I wish the best for you, but right now I have to go inward and focus on myself. And it's not selfish to say that. It's actually, it's self-awareness. Now I'm gonna let you circle back to that. I just wanted to really make sure that individuals understood that you don't have to wait for one thing to happen for you to create that change within your own life.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's creating that list. I actually thought to myself, why had I not done this before? Because we can scratch the surface with it, right? Where do we put our energy? What's draining us? What relationships are truly reciprocal? Where are we feeling light and love and joy in our lives? What's re-energizing us? But yet going deeper and saying, okay, here's the top 10 or top 15 areas where I spend the most time. These are the areas where I give energy, where I choose to on a daily basis. If you were given a terminal diagnosis, what would change? What would you have to mark off of that list right away? So why does it take a terminal diagnosis? Well, many of us don't think that that's actually going to happen to us, right? Many people never think a lot is going to happen, but it does. And so none of us are fully insulated or protected from life circumstance. And this just so happened to be a mountain that I would need to climb. And at that point, I felt like I was at a peak and I was starting to, climb the next one with a great support system and really talented, remarkable people around me. And it was this beautiful synchronicity of passion and talent while also being able to give back to others. And it was this state of flow, right? You hear a lot about flow. What I had to do to navigate this after, making that list and some really hard choices, uh, was really look at how I was making those hard choices, even saying, you know what, I'm going to opt out of chemo and radiation. This is not going to work for me. So it's really as simple, and Dale Carnegie talks about it. When you're faced with a really hard decision, again, put pen to paper. Some people type. I'm just one of those people. I like the tangible component of it. And you write out, here's the pros if I stick with this path, right? Or if I change, whatever the hard choice is. Here's the cons. It's really that simple. So after that, right, you look at it, which area has more, right, or less? What is the outcome for those areas, right? So for me, it was I continue to own the business, something that I loved with every part of me, right? And what that could look like is my stress continues, right? Which my baseline for stress was ridiculous because I've become accustomed to chaos. And I thrive in those environments. So, it was going to kill me potentially, right? Just the amount of work and energy. And when I say you only get what you give, I gave 150% to anything that I did, including the business. And I did not have the capacity to do that. So I'm looking at these pros and cons, and I'm seeing what the outcome would be if I did or did not sell the business, if I stayed in the Midwest, or if I moved to Texas, right? If all of these things. And then when I made a decision, Dale Carnegie also says, after you make this list, you make a decision. You trust your gut, you trust your heart, your instinct. And I don't mean, we can make a mistake and think, okay, what I'm thinking in my head is my gut, because it's really hard unless you're truly sitting with yourself and you're fully present to differentiate. Sometimes your gut, you know what the right thing to do is. So when you know that, act, do it right away, and do it swiftly, because we can play that game with ourselves and go back and forth, back and forth. We make a decision, and then the next morning we wake up and we go, well, what if this?
Right.
What if I'm wrong? What if, right? And we get fear, and then we get paralyzed almost because we can't make a decision. It's like people who are stuck in a really bad relationship, right? And who knows what's going on, but then they make justifications for it and they continue to do it. Like they're going to break up with somebody, right? Or whatever. And then they decide, no, I don't want to be alone.
And we've all been there. We've all been there in different relationships. I love the fact of deciding and taking action. Bethany, going into the break, we spoke about selling your business. You spoke about a conventional approach, but now let's shift gears and talk where you're at now with what you're doing to fight this battle and what that looks like where you're currently sitting.
A lot of shifts in this plan. I've learned a lot. There's been a lot of reading, a lot of research, and as I mentioned before, this is a new uncharted territory. It's a new mountain that I would need to climb. And so after making the choice to prioritize this, right, I want to be with my family. I want to focus everything I've got on this new fight. I am going to kick cancers, right? I'm going to do it. And I can do this. So the first thing right now is, I believe very firmly in manifesting outcomes and knowing all of the chemicals that are triggered in our brain that allow cancer to thrive. I knew what I had to do and have to continue to hold myself accountable to, right? Being successful is a discipline, right? To your point, you have to put in the work and time. Well, fighting cancer is no different. It requires a ton of discipline, a ton of routine, and the mindset, right, that you're going to win. That is not going to kill me. It is not going to crush me. It will not take me away from my children. It will not take me away from my family. It will not take me away from what the purpose is that I'm supposed to finish while I'm here, right? It's not going to do that. So having that mental attitude and making sure that I'm very sharp and clear on that, even when sometimes I'm dealt a bad hand, right? And I get news that I do not want to hear because I feel okay. And then sometimes you look at a scan or you go visit whatever doctor, there's maybe a clinical trial and things don't turn out the way you want. Okay, well, I have this bad hand of poker, right? A bad cards that were dealt to me. So I can, in a way, change the game by blessing to myself in terms of manifesting something else. So no, I'm not going to buy into this hand. I am going to continue on the path and be disciplined enough to know that it's going to be okay. And I have to take my 35 supplements a day. I have to work out. I have to.
And you did research, right? Yeah. So what you ended up doing was cutting out a lot of processed junk, really, which cancer attaches to. Most people don't recognize it. It'll cling on to that sugar, and including your stress. So you chose more of a holistic approach on how you were going to get into the ring.
Absolutely. And it's not just the external components, right? Because I made a lot of life shifts. I moved from the Midwest back home to Texas so that I could be near my immediate family, and they all live here, right? That was very important to me. There was the external shift of selling the business, going through that process, finding a new home, making sure that my children were all taken care of. Everything would be arranged, right? Planning financially for the future, whatever it may be. And then there's the internal shift that's required, making sure that I'm in a place where I truly am and have the guts to be courageous, to do a ton of self work, to put in the time to do the research, to not make assumptions about something without even taking the dive into it. And the more and more I started to research things, the more I learned about so many cases where people were given a diagnosis similar to mine, right? I was given initially 6 months to 2 years max to live. I've outlived my prognosis. And the only time where I felt like I was not going to is when I felt like I was going to throw in the towel when I was going through the conventional route. Now, again, that does work for some people. Some
Absolutely.
people beat cancer that way. And that's where I want to say there's not a one size fits all. There just are so many different ways to do this. And taking a step back and not letting fear get in the way is a huge asset when you go through this process.
And when we spoke in October was the 2-year mark for you, and you surpassed it. There was something that you had stated to me on the phone, was that you were planning your last steps. And we just had a phone conversation last week. Now you're discussing your next steps, which is huge. And you're planning your next steps. Now let's talk really quick here. We've got a little bit of time here, Bethany. What did your scans reveal, which is huge, and I have never been so excited in my entire life?
Yeah, so there is a reduction in there's been slight ones, but this was something that is more significant. And, I try not to get too emotional, right? Of course, this is an immense win, but then I think, well, they're not gone yet, right? There's still so much fight left, but it does provide affirmation, hope. It solidifies that the path that I'm on, the fight that I'm up against every single day, that I am winning, and that this beast is not going to win. And I don't know how long, right? This is going to go on. I don't know, but all I can do is continue to manifest the outcome where I can start beginning to think about, right, what is next? Because before, to your point, I wasn't. I was preparing for the end and doing that in a way that would protect my children, protect my family. And that was the only thing that I needed to accomplish. And now it's, all right, I'm still here.
Like,
I
here
need to
we
keep
go.
doing all these things. I can't rest on and think like, oh, everything's fine now, right? I'm just going to stop, the regimen of my diet and everything else that I'm doing. No, I have to keep going, and I need to make modifications to see what I can do to minimize it even more.
You shift. And you know what, Bethany? You are the epitome of a fighter. And I can't stress that enough. I want to thank you for coming on to Find the Fight, being my first guest. And I know that your fight has only just begun, because your mission is larger than yourself, and it's coming from a place where it needs to, right? It's soul deep. So thank you again so much for coming on to Find the Fight. And I can't wait to learn more about where your direction is going.
Thank you, Mariah.
All right, you guys check back next week on Monday. Every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon, you can join us on Define to Fight with unbelievable guests, and then also, too, different tips that you can take forward moving into your fight of life.